Hi, welcome. I'm Jen Aly, and I'm here today with Robyn Cohen, and we're excited to have an authentic, organic discussion about all things over 40 in entrepreneurship and business. So I'll introduce Robyn. She is founder of AFTR, which includes the After Edit newsletter and a community of women over 40 rewriting the rules of ambition and visibility. She's also a personal brand strategist and keynote speaker focused on reinvention and resilience and senior VP of Universal Media. And if you're new here to my channel, I'm Jen Aly, a business reinvention mentor and certified Martha Beck coach who spent 20 years plus helping burnout creative and holistic entrepreneurs redesign businesses that no longer fit who they've become and who they want to be. And I'm the creator of the Freedom and Flow framework and a TEDx speaker. My core belief is simple. Burnout is a signal, not a failure. And these days I live full time as a nomad and mostly in central Mexico. All right, so here we are. So we connected through an AI networking app called Bordy, which we both have been geeking out with. And I'm so delighted to meet you this week, was it, right? And
Last week, but
was it
yeah,
last week? Okay, great.
yeah.
Time flies. And we just decided to dive in, and we were talking about all these things, and we're like, let's just do a live, let's just do a video, so we can share some of this stuff instead of like letting it just kind of fall to the side because there's so much juicy stuff there. So. So what inspired you to do this work, to focus on this audience?
So I have probably been in this space now for many years when it comes to just women in general, visibility, representation. It kind of started way back in December of 2008 when I got involved with Girls in Tech in Los Angeles. And I actually founded the chapter out there and grew it to be one of the largest and most active chapters within that network. Then the husband's business took us to São Paulo, Brazil. And even though I wasn't able to continue with Girls in Tech, I just decided to launch my own thing. And it was called Girls on It. And I wanted it to be a wider lens than just women in tech. It was more like, let's just highlight women leaders in general, whether they are that more traditional executive, in the corporate world or founders. And so it was a lot of fun to do it down there and with some challenges, just language and culture, but it was awesome. And then returning to the US was still heavily active, again, just in the space in general, doing that work at a co-working space here that I ran for a couple of years, and then finally launching W Collective, which became a hub for all things women in, let's say, the greater Utah area. And as I turned 40 in 2013, and so I was slowly starting to really pay attention to the 40 under 40 accolades. And it just got to a point where I think it was February of 2022, where here in Utah, our business magazine called Utah Business did their annual 40 under 40. And it really kind of created, you could say, a little bit of outrage because of the lack of women on that list, right? So it was mostly
Oh.
men, very few women. And that was kind of the catalyst for me where I just was kind of like, what's up with these 40 under 40 lists? Like, why aren't we showcasing people over 40 and specifically women over 40? And after doing a little bit of a deep dive, and the one stat that stood out for me was 25% of the entire US population is a woman over 40. So that's over 80 million women who are 40 plus. That is a giant number, right? And so that was my catalyst. And then ever since then, I've really just dove headfirst into it, launching Utah's 40 Women Over 40, which we did for a couple of years, which was really, really successful and really, really impactful. And now I'm continuing it in my newsletter, taking a more, again, that broad lens where it's like, let's pick our head up. let's look across, the globe in terms of who are prominent women over 40 who have reinvented themselves, multiple times. How do we redefine what success looks like for women over 40, that kind of thing.
Hmm. So say more about so the defining success is a big deal for me too. And I used to be focused on money coaching. And so I also help people define what does prosperity mean to them because I think that the cultural norms of what is prosperity, what is wealth, what is success are things that can burn you out. Um, because we just have a default to go toward these things culturally, and socially. And I think we talked the other day about there was a CEO or somebody who stepped down because of
Yes.
challenges. Well, remind me what that was.
So Fidji, and I don't know how to totally pronounce your name properly, but Fidji Simo, who came from being the CEO of Instacart,
Mm,
was the number two at OpenAI. And she recently announced stepping down and focusing on her health. Now, she did mention that she has had this for, I want to say, approximately 7 years. And when she was at Facebook, even Mark Zuckerberg said, "Hey, maybe you want to take a year leave to really focus on on your health." And she didn't. And here we are.
hmm.
And I think that what we were starting to talk about was, you know, what does that look like for ambitious women in general? Ambitious women, ambitious mothers, whatever that looks like, where we're constantly trying to fit within the confines of a structure that was never built with us in mind. And I actually spoke about this again today on LinkedIn because Reshma Saujani, who's, I believe, the founder of, gosh, what's her mom's? I have to look up her organization, but she is the executive producer of No Country for Mothers, which is a new documentary that was just released. And she put out the promotional video for it with some key women saying some well-known things. So, for example, Kim Kardashian, back in 2022, I think when she was like, women just need to get their, bleeping, asses up and work, and then Emma Grede was also like, when it comes to work-life balance, she's like, that's the individual's problem, or you could say the woman's problem, right? Or even, Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In,
I was
which
thinking
I
about
think,
that.
yeah, I think at first there was this sense of, oh yeah, like we should lean in, right, to our careers, to our ambition and what that looks like. But it has since backfired because, again, it's that constant trying to like push women to fit into this structure. And you can call it whatever you want. You can call it capitalism, you can call it patriarchy, whatever you want to call it. But I think what people need to understand is that it actually doesn't work for anybody. It doesn't work for men, it doesn't work for women, it doesn't work for mothers, it doesn't work for anyone, right? And so I just feel like how can we stop sacrificing our lives and our health for our ambition? How can we, really be able to thrive in all facets of our lives with the, necessary support that we need to do that?
Yeah, and it's funny because I was just thinking of the book Thrive by Ariana Huffington,
Mm,
and how I think she like fell and hit her head at work or something. Like she was like so exhausted from
yes.
overworking, and it's about redefining success, and then I thought of two more things. One is that, the 40-hour work week was created with men in mind who had wives to do everything for them at home, decades ago. And that's it's like insane, to think that I haven't had a 40-hour work job since I was in my early 20s. I've always had teaching or entrepreneurship. So I've had a lot of flexibility, but I've worked more than for 40 hours sometimes within those
Yeah, right.
things. Um, but I feel like the conversation is shifting collectively. Like there is this shift to, this question, like what do I need to thrive and how do I do this? Because after 40, especially 45 on, depending on when perimenopause starts taking its toll,
Oh yeah.
and it's having its impact, it's like, I like for me, I'll just speak for myself too.
Yep.
So for me, I mean, I had health stuff on and off before, but 2020 was a big deal for me. And how old was I? I'm 51. So I was 45, right? And I had just done a TED Talk. I'd done a TED Talk in like fall 2019.
Yeah.
And I had that process of like focusing on the TED Talk for months. And it was actually a shorter timeline than it was supposed to be for the whole process.
Yeah.
Um, at the end of that, like my nervous system was so shot. I was so wiped out. And I overslept for like weeks afterwards. And then I had to face some health stuff that I wasn't clear what it was. And I got misdiagnosed like 3 times or more. And then during COVID, luckily, it was a really amazing time for me to just do a reset. I did a 9 month intense protocol with
Right.
functional medicine stuff. And I had to do that. Like I had to do that to be able to function. And
Yeah.
plus, then eventually getting hormone support and all the things.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like I'm very grateful and privileged. It's a privilege to have that. It was to have that timing and the luxury and the support and the resources,
Was.
and being open to that, and being able to prioritize that during that time. And I still feel like my body is like, oh, if you try to do too much, we're gonna smack you back down.
100%.
And so I feel like that's really common. And, I have like multiple friends who are in their 40s, or, around 50, who are, dealing with health challenges and having to really get major support because we've worked our tails off for so
Yeah.
long.
Oh yeah.
And so, so part of the thing for me is that so I think about this client that I had who was an acupuncturist, and she was so good. She had a wait list. Like she was really like just good at what she did, and she got results for people. And she was working herself into the ground.
Hmm.
And it was like, her health became such an issue that it was almost too late for her in the like, it was like, the business stuff was a part of what was going on, but it was almost too late for her to just like not take a solid break to heal because her
Yeah.
health issues were so bad. And so it's like, what do we need? And I hope these conversations help women who have the health challenges, who have the burnout, who feel exhausted, who feel like they're not refilling their tank, even though they feel like they should, because they should be happy because what they want now is what they used to want. I know that was me. It's like when I had this jewelry design business, I had dreamed of having the jewelry design business and I had a coaching business. So I had two businesses
Hey.
and I hardly had a solid day off per month. And so it's like, but like I felt like guilty for
Of course.
complaining. And so it's like,
Yeah.
how do we give ourselves permission to back up and I think too like the whole community thing is so massive and like these conversations and like talking honestly and authentically about what's going on and what we've experienced and I just saw this multiple things on Instagram especially about how women were initially like in groups of women, not in a nuclear family. And the nuclear family is why we're depleted because we're supposed to get everything from this one person and
Mhm.
it's not working, obviously. And so it's like, how do we create more connection and community and support each other in ways and give ourselves permission to do what we actually need and to figure that out because it's not always easy how to go from where we are and burnout and the pace we're in to something else that's not like all the way going to being off grid and like
Yeah.
farming. It's
Yeah.
not that that would be like less work, but yeah. So yeah, I'm just kind of riffing here, but
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that, you know. again, so there's a couple of things there. One is definitely trying to work within those confines, and we've been doing it for a really long time. So on one side of it is hat tip to the women who came before us that said, no, we want a career. We're ambitious, right? Which obviously kick-started the feminist movement and all of that stuff, right? And so if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here, being able to create these like wonderful careers, whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah, and I
Uh,
just wanted to chime in. I just watched for the first time On the Basis of Sex about Ruth Bader
oh
Ginsburg
yeah.
and all that she did and just how close we are to that generationally. Like that those kind of laws started coming in the decade we were born, So it's
Yes.
like, that's a new thing. Like we're still just,
Oh.
we've kind of gone to the
Well, that's
extreme.
exactly it. So yes, so it wasn't too long ago, when that all happened, and I'm glad that we had women that were like, no, we're gonna step into this within those confines and let's see what happens, right? And wow, like look what we've been able to achieve, right? Really on a global level, when you look at, every different country and what that representation and visibility looks like, for women, right? But underneath it all, and again, this doesn't go for each country, but it does go for this country, specifically the United States, probably more so than any other country, is the things that we are still battling and fighting, so that we can, thrive and not merely survive. And that is federally mandated, respectable time off for maternity leave. And I'd like to add in there paternity leave as well, right? Equal pay for equal work, right? I mean, we all know the list of those things. And it just shouldn't be a fight, especially when you see other countries around the world that do have wonderful maternity and paternity paid leave, right?
Yeah.
Where they do care about paying people equally, where they do care about the number of hours that you work, right? There's so much there, and I don't understand why we can't learn from those countries and add. I mean, obviously, depending upon the company that you work for here, some have made some strides where, okay, this is going to be off the top of my head, so I'm going to have to like fact check some of this, but I believe that Facebook offers 4 months paid leave, I want to say. I don't know what the paternity leave is. And there's others like that. So on an individual company basis, they have looked at their benefits and what they can offer. And I'm thinking like that's great, that that's a step in the right direction. But it's like, how long is it going to take for us to make it as a federally mandated paid leave? It's really ridiculous. And I really despise the fact we're like, oh, we're the greatest country in the world. We're not. We have a lot of issues that we need to take care of, right? And so there's all of that. And I think the thing that really started to probably challenge that traditional 9 to 5, 40-hour week was the pandemic,
Mm.
where all the white collar workers were forced to work from home. And just the major, upset of, what that looked like for the company and teams and employers and, and how to structure that so that companies could still work, and just get ahead really during that time. But then that added another layer, of like compounding issues where women then were juggling their job and their kids at home. And there was just so much that came with that. And I think what has come out of that is more and more women leaning into entrepreneurship. I think some of the highest stats are women over 50 leaning hard into entrepreneurship. I also, look at the rise of AI, and yes, we can do an entire session on the good, bad, and the ugly of AI. But I think if anything, what AI is going to be able to do is to better support launching companies, right? Is to better support entrepreneurship and what that means and to better support, your productivity level, your time management. I mean, there's going to be so much, right, that we're going to be able to do that will be an unlock, and it will definitely, I think, just be an interesting like pendulum swing between what's great about it and what's not. But I think for women, I mean, my gosh, I'm like, let's just lean it, maybe not use the word lean it, but let's but let's utilize it for what it is great at. Because if it allows us to create amazing businesses, to create money, maybe in a way that we haven't been able to, I mean, gosh, the list goes on. So that's, kind of how I look at it. And I think that if I can say, a lot of the issues are related directly to the corporate world. And it's the corporate world that is highly entrenched in, the capitalistic, patriarchal kind of world where we are still fighting for, the right benefits so that we can thrive as women.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said, just like comparing US culture to especially Europe and Scandinavia. I just saw that I think it was a country in Scandinavia, I can't remember which one, but they just required pay leave for maternity. Like they require it. It's not like an option. It's like this is what you're doing. Um, and then they make you take it's like weeks of vacation. It's way more than 2 weeks. Like when the US just has a sort of like normal 2 weeks vacation which as for me, I've never had that little because always had alternative, like, academic and entrepreneurship going on. But so I can't fathom it, but like that's just normal when you get a new job. And sometimes you have to build up to even get that. And
Yes.
in Europe, it can be like a month, a year,
Yes.
and it's like you have to take it, because they really respect like having time off. Or some countries just kind of shut down. Like Spain shuts down for August, I think it
Oh,
is.
yeah.
And so, yeah, and then, the idea that women, older women are creating businesses, I think the biggest market for entrepreneurship is between 50 and 55.
Yes.
And then a woman that I'm going to be interviewed by later today for a podcast, she has a business called Maturepreneur.
Oh, yes. I
And
think I've heard of it.
she has lots of great statistics on because some people are like, no, there's not much of an audience for that. And she's like, yeah, no, because there's 65% of that age group over 60 that are still working. And because
Yes.
they can't afford to retire partly,
Correct.
and they're just not done. So it's like, how do we, create value? And part of my work is oftentimes, if somebody's had a business or had a career for decades and they are offering something, sometimes what they're offering hasn't caught up with who they've become.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times they might be like, "Oh, yeah, I do this service," and it's like, yeah, but you have all this wisdom and all this experience, and you could create products, and you can do this kind of coaching, or it doesn't have to be this model that you've had before. And so a lot of times I'm helping people figure out what they can leverage and
Yes.
honor their wisdom based on their
Yes.
age. And I feel like more of that needs to happen instead of like, oh, I'm getting to the point where I'm unhireable. It's like, yeah, don't take a job, create your own business, and get help to do it because nobody's been taught how to do that.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I mean, it's ageism is real. And I have, it's funny because so maybe to backtrack a little bit, right? Because some people ask me, well, why 40 plus, right? Because now there's a lot of like 50 plus, right? And the whole idea is because the accolades that are 40 under 40, right? The only I mean, to my knowledge, the only accolade that is over 40 is Forbes 50 over 50, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad it exists.
Mm-hmm.
But then we leave out, for me, one of the most pinnacle decades of a woman's life. Because between 40 and 50, it could be that maybe, you're an empty nester or close to it, right? And you want to go back to work, right? Sometimes you're actually, and many times now, you're having kids, right? In your early 40s. And then what does that mean in the confines of like what we're working within, right? And to support you. I think a lot of women are pivoting and reinventing themselves at that time. And then, of course, there's perimenopause, which you spoke about before. I know what I've been through. And I think that when it started to creep in, because again, you don't know. It's not like you wake up one day and maybe there's like an app that you can connect with which says, guess what? This is the beginning of perimenopause, although maybe we should have it,
That's a good idea, actually.
right? So, because what happens to us during that time, I mean, it's really significant things that happen to us during that time in terms of brain fog, massive fatigue, depression, anxiety, rage, because your hormones are on this like insane roller coaster ride in your body. And how do you can't control that if you don't know what's going on, right? And then, one of the stats is that menopause causes like what is it, $1.8 billion in terms of like productivity loss. Because I mean, we're suffering and we're struggling, especially when you don't know what's happening to your body, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think that it is about 40 plus, right? And it's 40, 50, 60, 70, and what each of those decades mean. I mean, look
Hmm.
at Oprah. I just watched her yesterday. What is she, 71, 72? And she's just going strong like she's never, like, it's almost like, because she's made her podcast now look very much like her original show, which I love, right? There's an audience there, right? There's a stage with the fireside. I love it. And honestly, you could put that side by side between, from that to like her original show. I mean, it's almost like you don't see a difference in the decades between those two things, which I love, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think that that's also taking me to say that a lot of what we read about, what we see, the marketing, it's all about like, oh, anti-aging and oh, you're getting older or oh, but it's all just so negative, right? And
Mhm.
I think that it becomes even more intense when it is 40 plus, just because the messaging and the marketing and the advertising is just so much about like anti-aging and you don't want to look like, and we've already dealt with that in general, like when we're younger, right? Because
Hmm.
it's always like you're not
Always
good,
there. Yeah.
not skinny enough, you're not right. And I just think that it catapults to a new level during that time. And I just really wish that we would frame things in a way where, like, yes, we are going through a major transition, and what that means. But we are actually stepping into probably the most powerful decades of our life because we're done figuring things out. We don't have to figure things out anymore. And we might not maybe have reached, all of our goals and our dreams and our ambitions. I know what that looks like for me personally, and I'm turning 53 next month. Like, I'm like, sky's the limit, And I really want us to talk about things in that frame of mind, right? And talk about all the possibilities and the opportunities and like what's ahead of us. And to talk about it and say, but also like don't forget your HRT. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and like really embrace these next chapters of your life.
Yes. Yes, and I think that education is such a big deal, and I love that there are pioneers right now like Mary Claire Haverty, who was, I followed her years before she was an
Dr.
Oprah, and
Mary
she's,
Claire,
yeah, and there's
yes.
so many other ones like that too, who are giving us education, and then finding practitioners who can help us create, be remotely sane during this, and talking with each other about it too. Like that's part of
Yeah,
it too. It's like, oh, I didn't know. Like I've heard these crazy symptoms. Like for me, like years ago before I knew what perimenopause was, I thought it was going to be periods changing and hot flashes. So I've never had a hot flash and I'm 51 and my cycle changed like way later than I thought it would, And so because I've seen the graphs of like when you're like menstruating normal, before perimenopause, your cycle's like doop doop and all your hormones are predictable every month. And then in perimenopause, you have the four major hormones that are all doing chaos like for sometimes up to
yeah,
10 years.
correct.
And it's insane how much it impacts everything. And so then when you have less resilience, the advantage of having less resilience is that you have no F's to give. And you do start prioritizing yourself and you do start speaking up and to a different level. And so I think that's one of the major perks. And I just wanted to name some other women that I'm really inspired by. So I just saw that Madonna launched an album, I think, I'm not sure which day, but recently. And it blew out of the water the four other major pop stars that everybody's heard
Yeah,
of. And she beat them all. And she's
yeah,
67.
correct.
And so that is like boom. And also Jane Fonda and Dolly
Yeah,
Parton. I
love her.
mean, all both of them, and Dolly is like, I mean,
Oh,
I've seen bumper stickers like Dolly Parton for president. So it's like I just feel like, and the impact that people are making, like so, all the things like, is it Melinda Gates? Is that her name? The Gates.
yeah, Melinda
So,
French Gates. Yep.
yeah. So she just donated like millions or maybe more dollars
$215 million. Yep.
for research for women's health. Yeah.
Yes.
And I feel like the way is going to be the what we're doing. It's like talking about things, educating each other, supporting each other in transitions, and showing up and really like, and unfollowing all the anti-aging ads and stop feeding that industry and start feeding each other and ourselves on a deeper level. So, I love what you're doing with your newsletter. If people want to sign up, I'm going to put the link below. And I
Awesome.
have, yeah, of course. And then I have a quiz. If you do feel burnt out, you can take the quiz. It takes 2 minutes and it helps you find a starting point so it's not so overwhelming. Well, thank
Awesome.
you so much, Robyn. I've loved
Yes.
this
Great.
conversation. I look forward to staying in touch. And
Definitely.
thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure. This was awesome. Thanks for having me.
Of course.